Hey, welcome back. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Five Tool Baseball Podcast. We're up to 34, the Nolan Ryan of Five Tool Baseball Podcast. Today, I'm joined once again by Scott Director Drew Bishop. We've been fortunate to have some really big time guests on, for the last month plus, recruiting coordinators. I mean, heck, we just had Max Muncy on the show. We had Alex Bregman on recently. We've had a lot of really insightful, great conversations. And I think that this next series that we're doing with these guests, to me, will include the most important conversations we've had from an educational standpoint for our listeners, especially for those coaches and really, especially for those players. But we're going to be joined today by Dr. Scott Wiley of S2 Cognition, a group of people that we're partnering with at Five Tool and been in the works with some time. And we've learned so much about this product and the science behind it and why, in my opinion, it's an absolute game changer of a product across all sports. But, we talk so much about baseball, obviously, on here on the Five Tool Podcast, but really excited to talk to Scott today, a guy that, Drew, you and I have had conversations with in the past, have been around and really been able to just peek inside and understand what S2 Cognition is. Basically it's really, to me, answering the most important question that nobody's really been able to answer in sports, but specifically baseball. Why? Why do you do that on the field? Why are you the type of player that you are? Why do you swing at certain pitches and that sort of thing? And these guys have taken, these really, really, really smart doctors have taken a lot of what we know about the brain and how it works and applied it specifically to sports and being able to measure how your brain performs on the field cognitively.
Yeah, well, one of the things and one of the reasons both of us were drawn to working with Five Tool is having the ability to be involved with the development of players. And Lynn Van Lanningham and the whole Van Lanningham Five Tool family has been about development and about getting kids to stay in baseball and keep playing baseball one more year. So, over the course of the last year, Lynn's worked really hard along with the S2 guys to find a way that we could become partners. And, we're finally at that point, and we're excited to start rolling some of this product out. And it's going to take a lot of different shapes and forms over the next several years. But we're really excited to get to work with these guys just for so many reasons. The development that we're going to be allowed to share with kids will go a long way. And on the other side of it, it's going to play a big role in recruiting as we move forward. And we just really found a great partner in S2 and look forward over the next couple episodes to sharing what it is, how it works, and how we're going to roll it out.
Yeah, I remember when I first spoke with Lynn on the phone for a while about potential opportunity at Five Tool. S2 was one of the first things that came up, and to hear the excitement in his voice, and I'm thinking in my head about, we can do so many things in baseball right now, spin rates and how much your pitch breaks with things like TrackMan and Hawkeye and Rapsodo, like biomechanics labs and biomechanics analysis. And there's been just so much of an evolution from how hard you throw and what your eyes are kind of seeing and doing, reporting that way, to so many statistics behind the game. But there's been a void for the mental, the cognitive, the brain, why it functions the way it does, and why players perform the way they do. And that's why we're so excited about this, because you can sit down and take a test, whether it's 30 minutes, if you're on the younger side player wise, or whether it's 45 minutes if you're collegiately or professionally, and you're put through the ringer, as Scott likes to tell us. They bring the heat, and Drew, you can speak to it because you've sat down and taken a part of the test, and it's a grind because it's specifically designed to target those areas of the brain and those decision-making processes that happen so quickly on the field and things like that. But you can sit down and take this test. And I kind of compare it to like, if you go to the eye doctor and you get those tests about looking at things like that, but if that was a game with a mouse and you kind of had to put the mouse in certain areas, and you do that for 45 minutes and they take you through these different parts of the test and of the brain, and almost instantly you can get a bar graph. And you can go to S2Cognition.com and you can look at one of these example graphs, and it's giving you scores in certain areas with an overall S2 score. And right then you can be armed with just invaluable information about why you are the player that you are, why you might swing at certain pitches, or why you might struggle with certain pitches, or why as a pitcher you might excel in certain situations, and in other situations a little bit more difficult. And we had Max Muncy on, and he talked about having to rediscover having fun with the game. The game is really hard, and a lot of the fun can be lost in the game if you don't truly understand why you're performing the way you are, or why as a coach a guy might be struggling in certain ways, and you're hammering over the head with something like, I'm telling you to lay off this pitch. Now that coach can understand, oh, his brain is wired a certain way that he's going to struggle to lay off that pitch. We understand why now. We can be more efficient with our time and craft a specialized developmental approach for him to help him become a better player. And there's just nothing like this in the marketplace. And that's why we talk about development so much. I think that this will become the SAT type of test for sports, for athletes, because it spits out just invaluable information that nobody else has really been able to provide until now.
Yeah, well, I can tell you this. As you know, by nature, I'm a hole poker. I annoyingly so to most people, but in my last role when I worked at Texas, we were pitched, hundreds of products and all kinds of stuff on the player development side. And I spent a lot of time trying to figure out why things would work or wouldn't work, and most of the time you could tell pretty quickly if it was a gimmick. And this is something that, over the course of several months, I spent a lot of time trying to poke holes in, asking, well, what about this? Or what about this? And I can't, this is one of those game changing type of products that's really going to change the way that people look at the cognitive side of training when it comes to baseball and other sports as well. But, obviously our focus is on the baseball side, but, it's a unique product. There's not much out on the market, actually nothing like it on the market. And, their values aligned with ours, and it just made all the sense in the world for us to work with them.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll listen to Scott here shortly, kind of explain a lot of these things better than we are, because he's working at a different stratosphere when it comes to how the brain works and things like that. I gotta imagine his S2 score might be a little bit better than ours, but yeah, we can endorse this. And I just think it's got a real chance to at the end of the day do that, like what we talk about, give players an opportunity to keep playing, whether that's a year, whether that's 10 years, whatever it is. I really think that they could really just put guys on the right developmental path by understanding who they are and how their brain functions, and best understand what they need to work on, what their weaknesses truly are, and what their strengths are as well, and how to have fun with the game by understanding just how your brain works and things like that. But again, you can go to S2Cognition.com. They've got a great setup there. And this is going to be the first part of a few interviews we're going to do with some of the guys that we've befriended and worked with closely over the last few months at S2 Cognition. So here's our interview today with Dr. Scott Wiley of S2 Cognition. Happy to be joined today by a guy that is answering a lot of questions, or providing the technology and the science behind a lot of those questions. We've had some big leaguers on recently, like Max Muncy and Alex Bregman. We've got a guy that's providing the technology around a really, really exciting tool that's helping those big league players and some organizations answer why am I the way I am? Why am I the type of player that I am? We're joined by Dr. Scott Wiley from S2 Cognition, very, very deep and decorated background in neuroscience and neuropsychology. And Scott, first off, I love hearing the story about how S2 came about. I believe you guys were watching the NFL draft, and you keep hearing those buzzwords like, you got great instincts, or he kind of plays above his speed, or he's a coach on the field. He's got a great mind for the game and things like that. And you guys as co-founders of S2 Cognition down the road kind of just ask those questions. Can we come up with the science to answer why these guys are the way they are? Is that accurate?
And yeah, that's exactly. It's not really a very sexy story, but it did unfold along the lines you suggested. It was back in 2014 after an NFL draft, and you're exactly right. I mean, we have all these terms, this vernacular. Every sport has terms to describe those instinctual aspects of athletes. Those largely been considered in the intangibles. And you're not born with a baseball gene. You're born with genetic capacities that influence your physical development, your athletic development, and your decision making, your cognitive development. And so these athletes, the reason we have these terms to describe these incredible abilities to anticipate and beat punch and make certain kinds of decisions, because their brains are just wired to see things and process things and control their motor system in ways that most human beings can't. And so you're exactly right. We stepped back and said, look, that's one thing we've been doing extremely well in the cognitive neurosciences, is capturing and understanding these split-second decision systems. And we've had methodologies and tools in the cognitive sciences at our fingertips. We've used in research studies for decades, and we can quantify these skills. So we didn't have to reinvent tools to capture these. We were able to just assemble the best tools from the cognitive sciences to put together a precision evaluation of the kinds of split-second decision skills athletes actually make when they play and perform, which you guys know is a lot different than what you do in the classroom on a concussion test. In everyday, those capture everyday life thinking skills. Very different when you cross those white lines or step in that batter's box. Things happen really fast.
Yeah, so like you said, you created an assessment to measure essentially how the brain is wired and why a hitter hits the way they do, how pitchers assess risk, and you're able to differentiate who's potentially a better reliever or a starter just based on personality and the way that they're wired. Talk a little bit about what the actual assessment is and what you do with the results once you have taken the test.
Yeah, absolutely. And to kind of address the first part of your comment, you're right. These tendencies are expressed in every athlete. And I think it's important, and we always make an important point, that this is one piece of the puzzle. It's a piece of the puzzle that's been neglected in sports broadly for years. You certainly have to have all the other tools to be a successful athlete. You got to have certain requisite physical skills, mechanical, technical skills. You got to have some psychological makeup that propels you to have the grit, the drive, the self-efficacy, the emotional regulation and resiliency that it takes to become an elite athlete. This puzzle was missing, the cognitive piece of athletes, this decision making. The way we assess it, I mean, Brandon, Allie, and I, we started S2. We spent most of our careers in academic medicine and academic medical centers, running research laboratories and doing clinical work. So we've used tools from brain imaging to brain stimulation, electrodes on the scalp to pick up deep brain electrical signals while you're making these split-second cognitive skills. But it turns out we need to do is sit an athlete in front of this carefully constructed laptop computer with specialized equipment to ensure millisecond precision, and then bring the heat. We present visual information to the threshold of what brains can actually see and process, and see how far we can push athletes. We measure reaction times in that tens to a few hundred millisecond range that you're using and executing. And we look at your timing systems and how well you can control impulses, how fast you can stop when something suddenly changes in your environment. You have to stop quickly. And all we have to do is put you in front of a computer, have you go through these tasks, and we can tease apart how every athlete's brain is uniquely wired. And that was the beauty and the elegance, was that coaches and players and commentators for years have appreciated these differences. We're just now quantifying and measuring them, bringing a way of understanding what your processing strengths are, what your weaknesses, your challenge areas are. And just like everybody knows their strengths physically and the things they need to work on, this gives you an athlete at all levels insight into how your brain is processing the things it does well and the things you probably need to work on or adapt around, change your approach in order to keep it from showing up on the field.
Yeah, like you said, we've heard these words used to describe players, by coaches, analysts, whatever, for such a long time. And to me, why I'm so excited about this product and us at 5tool having an opportunity to work with y'all is it's groundbreaking, because there's an actual test and you get actual results like immediately, I was blown away by the correlation. So, take us through the time required for the test and things like that, because I think some people might hear like all these things and they're like, whoa, okay, is this like, are we taking like tests over hours and days and things like that? But the reality is, I kind of compare it to, it's almost like when you go to the eye doctor and you're doing those tests with those machines and you're kind of aligning things and things like that, but it's taking, kind of the reaction time to it and the brain processing and things like that. So how long does the test take? And it's literally as easy as you sit in front of a computer with a mouse. It's a finely tuned computer and mouse and things like that. But you're able to get this thing done and get those results pretty quickly.
Yeah, so it kind of varies. So kind of funny, when we first got into this and we started interacting with professional baseball teams and the MLB teams, NFL teams, they said, well, can we test in about 10, 15 minutes? And we always joked and punched back a little bit and said, man, you leave your car to get your oil change for 30, 45 minutes. The brain happens to be a little more complicated. So we need more than 10, 15 minutes to really understand. On the flip side, if you gave us 8 hours, we can learn a lot about how brains work. But no, we tried to whittle it down to be an impactful and meaningful assessment. Our the evaluation we usually give to professional athletes and collegiate athletes takes about 45 minutes, 42 to 45 minutes. For the younger athletes, the high school and the youth players, we have extracted kind of the core features, the core cognitive skills for their particular sport and reduced that down to about a 30-minute assessment. And after 30 minutes, you feel like you've been playing a game for a couple quarters, couple innings. We bring the heat, and that's the thing. Every sport, there are different demands on decision making, and those differences are reflected in the way we have designed our evaluation. So our evaluation of football players, the one we use for capturing NFL prospects for our NFL teams, we capture with our college football programs. Very different. If you're a middle linebacker, you have to be able to not only focus your attention at times at a central point on the field, but you've also got to be able to broaden your attention, distribute your attention across the field to see movement and action, anticipate. If you're a hitter in the batter's box, you're not going to be distributing your attention. You better be locked on and trying to pick up that ball out of the hand as efficiently as you can. And so there's different skills that athletes bring, are demanded of athletes across the sports, and that's reflected in our assessment. To get back to Drew's comment, I mean, after you're finished taking the assessment, things happen automatically, and you get a detailed, personalized report. It breaks down your scores and compares them to whatever reference group that we've identified. So if you're a high school baseball player and you want to see how you stack up to the top high school players in the country that we test every year in anticipation of the MLB draft, you can kind of see how you stack up. We have reference groups. When we hit, I think we got lucky when we got into this, because I think the sports world is coming out of the brain training kind of decade and decade of the brain in science, and everyone's starting to think about this next frontier of understanding athletes, how they make decisions, how their brains work, and their brains are wired. And so we've been fortunate to have hit it at the right time and enjoy exclusive relationships with several NFL teams, a third of Major League Baseball, the other major sports we have active contracts and partnerships with, and college programs all around the country that are using this to try to get that advantage. To your point, understanding how your athletes are wired puts you in a better position to start working on their decision-making skills in a very targeted, customized, individualized way.
Yeah. So, like you mentioned, Scott, I think where this product differentiates itself from a lot of things out on the market is twofold. Number one, you're not necessarily taking the test and applying, whatever lessons or drills you're doing to improve yourself on the test. The goal is to improve on the field. And I think one of the things that people need to understand is that a lot of the ways that S2 suggests that you do this are all ways that baseball people are familiar with. There's nothing complicated about the drills, and you're taking this customized information to help you practice more efficiently, because the results, and it allows you to understand why you do the things you do, or why you are wired the way you are, and how to combat that. So talk a little bit about, what you do with the results from the time you get them, and how this is different than other types of products out there on the market right now.
Okay, if I start meandering too far, you guys got to reel me back in. There's a lot of questions and a lot of good stuff, I think, and I'm not trying not to step on any toes as we go, because I think there's a lot of smart people out there trying to figure this out, trying to help athletes become their best and optimize their skills. Let me start by just saying, when we kind of stepped into this, another reason or impetus for focusing on the evaluation side of it was because the sports world got inundated with all these brain training, iPad apps, phone apps, computer games, whack-a-mole boards, I think there was genuine interest in trying to see if we could train the brain on all these technological devices and through these formats to help athletes be better on the field. So the first issue was everyone went to training before they went to diagnosis. And that was part of our main motivation, was that, look, you don't walk into your doctor and ask for a prescription before you get a diagnostic. And so you have to understand how your brain is wired, what are your strengths, what are your weaknesses, and then begin to ask the question, how do I train those weaknesses and mitigate their expression in performance on the field? And how do I capitalize on my strengths? Just because you have cognitive capacities to see or process information well, doesn't mean you're taking full advantage of those, or you've hooked them up to the sport you're trying to improve in. And so there are specific ways to train those. The other problem with some of the brain training stuff, while there's some value in some of those skills as part of a bigger program to improve your cognition. The other problem is they usually end up in what we'd call a transfer path dead end. And so you get better at the games, you get better at the whack-a-mole board, you can move the needle on the program, but it's hard to get transfer from that computer game, that computer context to the field. And performance is all about linking up what you see to what you decide to what you do. And if you put away the to what you do part, so you put the bat down and you go train only on an app, that's not how the brain learns expertise. That's not how we develop the incredibly sophisticated brain circuitry that links vision to decision to action. You've got to incorporate it all, or you'll run into these dead ends in terms of transfer. There's a lot of creative minds out in baseball coming up with drills. We hear them all the time at all levels, and there's some really cool creative stuff. What's kind of been lacking in baseball, though, and we get asked this question that kind of speaks to the conceptual framework that I think would be helpful, that we have kind of come up with that would be helpful, is we get asked all the time, hey, tell me a drill and how do you know it transfers? And I think we're thinking about that too simplistically. We're not interested in an isolated drill that we hope transfers to the field. I think what we want to start thinking about is how we construct a sequence of drills, a progression of drills that move from a very controlled kind of environment that's probably less like the game to a more dynamic environment that's more game-like. We got to start thinking in terms of transfer paths and structuring drills that take you from simpler, more controlled environments where you can build mastery, and then you slowly work your way to really build dynamic, flexible, cognitive, and decision systems. So I think that probably captures one of the fundamental differences. We are big fans, and that's where we've committed all of our time. Everyone was coming up with these fancy technological tools for training, and very few were stepping back, at least from the cognitive side of things, and saying, how do we take principles and concepts for how these systems work that we know, that we've studied for years in the lab, and apply them to smarter cognitive drills, decision drills on the field in the baseball context and baseball environment. And I played a little baseball in college. I don't brag about it. I got injured, but then even if I didn't get injured, I probably still wouldn't be bragging. But so I've been around the game a little bit at some level. And that's where athletes want to be, is on the field, in the cage, practicing their craft, developing their skills. And so all of our drills push the cognitive training to the field, to the cage, where you can really move the needle. And as I've mentioned for the third time, really link what you see to what you decide to what you do. And we're talking about those systems operating in sub half a second, less than 500 milliseconds. That's where the work's we have the best chance to move the needle. Practicing in baseball, in the context, training. Our evaluation, we don't use it as a metric to see how your training is improving these systems. We use our system to tell you what your current capacities are. Those are going to change. If you're 12, they're going to look differently at 14, at 16. But you want to know kind of how these systems are developing, what the capacity of your cognitive decision systems are at each stage of your development. Those then provide the guide for what you should be working on the field in the game of baseball. If you're a two-sport athlete and you got low impulse control, that's going to be expressed in different ways on the football field and on the baseball field. You got to train them to link up and work on impulse control in both contexts in very different ways.
Yeah, I think one of the most exciting components about this from a baseball side is, the instruction and the coaching element. You might have a guy that he can't hit a slider low and away. He just can't. And the coach is saying, well, lay off of it, or why can't you hit it? Or, they're going to throw it to you. And this is a tool that if you're in the right developmental structure with the right coaches that aren't taking the cookie cutter approach to things, those coaches can understand, okay, this guy's wired in a way to where he's just simply not going to excel at this. We now know that we have the tool behind that, the science behind that, to tell them, to give them this information. What kind of feedback have y'all heard from those coaches you work with at whatever level about being able to better work with their players, instead of yelling at a guy, man, why can't you just lay off the slider? You probably have some coaches now. It's like, wow, okay, I know why that guy can't lay off that slider. Now we can better help him craft his approach to maximize what he's best at cognitively.
Yeah, it's a great observation. I mean, we've had coaches say, I have a love-hate relationship with this information because I love it, because now I understand the why. That's what we've been missing. You know, a guy chases because you saw a guy chase, or you saw a softball player chase. I mean, so you know when hitters chase, you just don't know why they chased. And it turns out to be different reasons. It could be because of how you misprocessed what the pitch was, where it was going to cross the hitting area, or it could be you saw it well, but you still chase because you have low impulse control. We've got analytics at the professional level that point to multiple factors. If you don't know which of those factors are, you're just guessing in terms of what is the culprit. And so coaches will say, I love it because it tells me what this athlete needs to work on, making better predictions about the trajectory of the pitch, or this hitter needs to work on impulse control and training the take decision. Got some cool studies that show you can actually move the needle. You want to stop chasing that slider at the knees? We've got data, and using these cognitive principles in the game of baseball, in the cage, to reduce chasing a very specific pitch. Really cool stuff. But I digress. The coaches will say they hate it though, because now they can't yell at a kid anymore, because they just say, man, I can't yell at you anymore because your brain's just not wired to do it the way I'm expecting it to do it. So I got to find a different way to approach this kid, a different strategy, or now I need to tailor this uniquely to you. I think Coach Corbin, Vanderbilt head baseball coach, been so successful. We test Vanderbilt's baseball players, their new freshmen and transfers every year, because they want to get a jump on. And his comment was the best. He said, look, we individualize our player development, and it starts with understanding who these players are and who they aren't, what their strengths and weaknesses are. We want every kid to develop to be the best player they can be, and it starts with understanding. And this was a missing piece, and so they use this, like other programs, to understand their athletes, and then they start doing cage work. Everyone needs to work on different things and prioritize different decision-making demands and challenges in their batting practice work.
Yeah, well, I think some of what you touched on with the Vanderbilt stuff is something that I think a lot of our listeners can appreciate and are interested in the sense that a lot of this information is going to be really helpful for people in recruiting. As we've started to get involved with S2 at 5 Tool, we've seen quite a few high-profile programs across the country in baseball start to utilize this information for their teams, and with the hope of really making this a game changer in the recruiting process. Because if you're looking at as many kids as a lot of these college programs are having to sort through to determine whether or not, this guy or that guy is who we should target, this is just another informational piece that's going to allow them to make decisions on kids. And I think it's such an interesting tool. I mean, if you can talk a little bit about some of the programs, not just necessarily in baseball, but in different sports too, I think it shows the power of the information that this test and assessment can give coaches, not only to help the development, which we're super involved with, but for the individuals on the recruiting side.
Yeah, no question. I mean, the value proposition in terms of scouting was really apparent and immediately apparent at the professional level. And so that's one of the biggest applications that's being leveraged by NFL teams. And MLB teams, NBA, is how do we capture this aspect of the athlete performance? Because I mean, we all know as you move up the ladder, the game gets faster, more complicated, more dynamic, and your physical tools can carry you for a while at the lower levels. But at the higher levels, it's all about how quick the millisecond level advantages you have in making decisions. And I mean, having tested thousands and thousands of athletes at the professional level and the collegiate level, that I mean, those at the top will unequivocally say, gosh, it is about decision making. That's what gets you to the highest level, and that's what allows you to stay. They just see and process information differently than most human beings on the planet. I mean, that's what's been amazing for us, is to see and confirm, elite athletes aren't just physical and athletic specimens. Their brains are wired to do some incredible things that are elite among human beings on the planet. But at the recruiting, you get down to the college levels, absolutely. We work with, dozens and dozens of college programs and universities around the country. And one of the first questions is, how do I get this assessment on our recruit, not just as a yes, no, thumbs up, thumbs down decision, but how do I understand the athlete better and bring athletes in that fit our system, or athletes that are wired as certain styles of players. I want different cognitive skills for my middle fielders versus my edge players on the soccer field. Or, hey, I want safety's got to be able to do things differently than lockdown cornerbacks. I want different cognitive profiles and styles. And absolutely on the recruiting end, it becomes important. And I think if, we always try to balance that with the player development side of things. So if you're a young high school athlete, you want to know this about yourself, because you can improve these things and work on these things and develop so that you can achieve the next level if you're an aspirational player. But it also is, is going to be a piece of the puzzle that's going to aid in that recruitment process. These are important skills, and the younger you start working on these dynamic decision skills, the better chance you're going to have. I've got an 11-year-old. He just turned 11, and who knows if he's going to be an outstanding physical specimen and athlete. But I will tell you this: you ought to see the crap I put him through. I want him to be able to see and make decisions, and that's going to confer an advantage, even if, irrespective of what his physical development and the timing of his physical development, his ultimate capabilities as an athlete. Man, if you can make better decisions and see things before others and outthink and process and know what to look out and have the skills, and you can train those things at a younger age, you're just setting your young athlete up to be successful, not only in sports, but probably successful in other aspects of decision making.
Yeah, to me, one of the most powerful things that we've seen when we've been out doing the testing with you guys is when we've gotten the results back after the kids have taken the test. Paul scans them real quick and, sits down with the kid and says, I've never seen you play. I don't know you from Adam. Don't know anything about you before today. And I'm going to guess that based on your assessment results, that you probably come back to the dugout a lot and say, man, I just missed that. And and it comes back to one of the results on the test, and the drills and all the everything that we suggest from there, is meant to combat that and help that. It's just something that, we've seen time and time again. When we look at the results and these kids are blown away that exactly what you're, typecasting them as a hitter is usually right on from the type of hitter that they are. And the coaches echo the same things.
Yeah. I'll be honest. I mean, the first times we were given these tests, our first time we ever administered, we had a connection to LSU's football program back in 2014. And we got on the phone with, it was actually Tommy Moffitt, who was their strength and conditioning coach, and Jack Marucci, their athletic trainer. So we went down there and said, hey, this is what we designed. We put this evaluation together, and here's what we think we can tell about your athletes. And then 2 weeks later, we were down testing their 109-man roster and went back, gave the results. And, the looks and the reactions, how do you know this? Are we being punked? Is this voodoo? And it just, from that perspective, it's pretty remarkable that you can sit an athlete down in front of a computer and have them take these sophisticated yet simple to understand tasks on a computer, and you can figure out the kinds of processing bottlenecks and strengths that they bring to the field. But for us, we've been studying these systems. We so appreciate the individual differences and the unique ways of capturing and understanding these systems that we knew we were measuring the right systems. It was just going to be a matter of, was it predictive? When we got into the analytics, and were these things contributing to the prediction of who makes it to the highest level? Can we understand chase rates more deeply by understanding how your brain's wired? And those analytics have evolved and been confirmatory and fallen in place. But it also, a big piece was, hey, does it match with, coaches know their players and they know their tendencies, and coaches have this tacit knowledge that comes from just watching thousands of players, hundreds and thousands of players, and working with them. Does it match their perspective and their understanding and the tendencies that they've identified that sometimes aren't easy to put into words, but they know what they're looking at. They know there's something isn't right here. Something's off here. Something's not. And we're just bringing some language and some insights into those kinds of experiences and that knowledge. So that's been one of the funnest things, is to have coaches just say, gosh, then we have great experiences when coaches will start then predicting, hey, I bet this player, struggles with impulse control. And sure enough, you pull it up and they're at the 3rd percentile. They're still a great athlete and they're still going to perform well, but they've got a disadvantage. And that shows up and is expressed in real behavior on the field. So, yeah, that's always fun.
Yeah, I'll never forget the first time I saw Paul read one of those reports, and the kid was like, "Whoa!" Just like his jaw dropped. And it's the correlation is one of the most exciting things about this. We've been having some fun with all our guests. We could talk to you about the science and stuff behind this for hours. We've always asked these guys if, let's say Scott Wiley is mashing homers in college and baseball, and it's the NIL era. What kind of NIL deals would Scott try to seek out to for the name, image, likeness, to kind of capitalize on that brand and make some money off of it, or get some free stuff in a process? Like, ours always veer towards food for some reason. So what do you think that you'd like to capitalize on if you were a big time athlete in the NIL era?
Well, if I'm a big time athlete in the NIL era, then food was the first thing that popped into my mind, because there's just it'd be a pipe dream to expect the kind of royalties that everyone is hoping for. So, you give me some, I played ball at Point Loma University in San Diego. So you give me some free gift cards to Alberto's or Santana's for some serious taquitos and burritos in San Diego, man, I'm a happy dude. So I've hit the lottery. So yeah.
That run time might decrease a little bit with those gift cards, but you'll be living the life for sure. That's right. As somebody who was in San Diego recently, I can see why you'd veer towards that direction.
Something happens though as you get older. That run time gets longer and longer.
Yeah. We've got the science behind that figured out. We got that figured out real quick, and even Drew and I know how to figure that out. But well, Scott, man, thank you so much for the time. And this is going to be part of a series, and we're going to talk to you guys. And I know Drew has seen this in action more than I have, but man, like I've been a part of the presentation, things like that. I continue to be blown away by just the correlation and the ability for something to finally answer the why behind the thought process that happens on the field and making those decisions and things like that. So you can get to S2Cognition.com to learn more about it. They've got a visual of the bar graph type thing that you would get after a test. And it's really, it's ability to take the very complex and present it in a simple way. I think is a true beauty in all this. So Scott, thanks so much for the time, man. I know us at 5-Tool are super excited to keep working with you guys and get this into more hands of players and coaches, because I think it's a game changer product.
Well, I really appreciate it. I appreciate the opportunity. You know, we've had a great journey through the professional and collegiate, you know, the youth and getting young players thinking about decision making. And you certainly got to spend time on your physical development, your technical development, but so little time is devoted to becoming a better, more selective, faster decision maker, whatever sport you play. That's where we're really passionate. And we want to bring something that's not voodoo or a gimmick or a gadget. You don't have to pay for, you know, these drills you can do in the backyard with your kid. And so it's really important to us to bring something impactful, meaningful, that's really going to help these kids develop and advance their skills so they can play at the next level. And I think that's why we're so excited to work with 5-Tool. Is your motto is to get kids to play one more year, and that has to do with keeping them excited, keeping them well equipped, and developing them so that they can enjoy the game of baseball one more year. So we're excited to appreciate the time. Happy to continue the discussion at any time.
Awesome. Thanks, Scott.
Thanks, Scott. Appreciate it, man.
You bet.
Thanks to Dr. Scott Wiley of S2 Cognition for joining us, a guy that Drew and I are fortunate to have had several conversations with, just learning about this product and this technology and the science behind it. And we could have talked to him for hours because it's so fascinating. And I think that, to me, one of the most impactful things is kind of what we ended on with him discussing when players get their assessment or when coaches see the assessment. And, you know, we'll have Paul Phillips on at some point, who's got a very vast baseball background. And he's going through these reports and he's picking out things. He goes, I bet you do this. And I bet you do this. And like the reaction on the faces of these kids, it's just like, how do you know that? And to me, that was really, you know, it's one thing when you're talking about the science behind the decision-making and the way the brain works and that fires and the impulse control and things like that, which is why this ends up being so accurate. But if you're able to show people the correlation behind it, it can just really make a huge difference. And I remember seeing the graph that they showed us one time with one of the presentations about the S2 total score and how major league players that they've tested rate. And if you score low, you know, chances are you better be bringing some high level mental makeup, scouting report and things like that to that area. But just to see the correlation, to me, is why this is such a game changer product.
Yeah. And for me, one of the more powerful examples that we've seen too is from a college coach that's really well known and very progressive when it comes to technology on the hitting side. You know, he shared with us that he had 2 hitters that had an issue chasing, but, you know, and as a result, he always had, you know, he put them through the same drills. But when these guys were tested, you got the information back that the reason that these 2 guys chased was for completely different systems of the brain. And for him, that told him that he needed to create different drills or different progressions for guys to go through at the plate when they're training to really address how they're doing it. You know, one of the things he shared with us is one of the guys with the drill set they'd been doing had been picking it up and improving, while the other guy came across as hard-headed or not listening. But with this information, it basically just said, hey, the way you were doing it wasn't going to help this other guy over here. And it changed his mindset on how he had to approach training that hitter. And it made him a more successful hitter pretty quickly as he began to do drills that made sense for his deficiency.
Yeah, it's such an eye-opening experience, for coaches and players, because there are guys that have certain holes in their game, and so much of this I think is invaluable for hitters, because it's really hard to hit, and there's velocity and there's spin and there's break, and Scott explained to us one point the science behind, like, your eyes can only see the baseball up to a certain miles per hour, and then you basically your eyes and your brain have to basically project where the ball is going to end up. And they can be super frustrating for hitters to feel like they've got this hole in their swing, or they can get out certain ways, and they work at it and they don't really understand why they're struggling in that area, or maybe they don't understand why they excel in certain areas. It can be so valuable to know, hey, this is what you're really good at. Craft your approach as a player around these strengths, and understand those are your strengths. Like, if man, I hit great velocity or up or something like that, try to jump on those types of pitches and know, okay, these are the types of things that I need to work on. But just the ability to answer the why. And you mentioned, the people that are already working with S2 and this technology are some of the biggest names across sports. You go on the S2 Cognition website, and there's Tim Corbin just praising it. He mentioned LSU and Tommy Moffitt, and we know, Nick Saban, and there's a third of MLB teams that use it, and the Saints are on the website as saying that's something that they really use. And I just think that the more this gets into the hands of people across sports, the more young people can really benefit from it. I didn't realize, and it's kind of might be common sense, but the brain still has those valuable developmental years earlier on. And it's one of the things that we're at Five Tool is excited about, is those young players have a little bit more time to kind of train the brain, and kind of fine tune some things, as opposed to those guys that are, 30, 35-year-old, pros. They don't have as much time to do that stuff.
Yeah, well, for high schools and for colleges, it's kind of a two-way product.
Mm-hmm.
On one side you get the development, and the other side you get the recruiting. Mm-hmm. As a high school player that takes the test, he's going to be able to take these results to some of these programs that utilize this, and it's going to give them a leg up if they can quantify, that they have what it takes from a brain hardwiring standpoint. I think what the term that Lynn always uses is, this has a chance to become the kind of the SAT for college athletics, and get to a point where you're going to see all kinds of people using it. And the people that understand this stuff are just going to be able to do things more efficiently. And, as people, at the high school level and the college level, one of the biggest things they fight is time. And if you're able to, kind of focus in a little bit more on what you really need to work on with some actual data that tells you that, you're going to have a better chance to be successful. One of the ways I've seen, some of the college programs use it is it allows you to kind of categorize a group of players, like this group over here may need to work on more timing drills, where this group over here may need to focus more on some of the visual perceptive stuff. And so their drills may look a lot different. And the programs that are willing to put in the time and the effort to create those programs versus just using a cookie cutter approach for however many hitters they have are going to have a leg up, just because they're using the data and becoming more efficient in their development.
Yeah. And when he said that, the test brings the heat, he wasn't lying.
I've taken it.
Yeah, Drew can speak to it, because he sat in front of that computer and done it. And I think that one of the best traits about the test and the system and the way that designed is something you brought up during our conversation with Scott, is like, you're not training for the tests. Right. Like, one of the things that they found throughout their research is taking the test multiple times doesn't really change your score. And they have ways that, like, if you're a guy and you're some college freshman and you're just kind of, screw this, I'm gonna half-ass it. Like, the test will flag that, it'll say, hey, no, this isn't the way this is supposed to be done. But like, you can't necessarily train to this test. Like, the more times you take it, what they found is your score stays like in the very, very, very same range. But you can speak to it, man. It does bring the heat. It's like 45 minutes. And it's like, okay, man, I just went through something, because it's really, they've done an amazing job of taking that science behind how the brain works and applied it in this way. And like, it really tests a lot of those decision-making processes that are happening instantly.
Yeah, it puts you through the ringer. I was exhausted mentally by the time I finished, and it does. It really, from the results I got, my scores were a little lower than I was hoping, but to be quite honest, but I took it alongside with the OU coach and podcast guest, friend of the podcast, Clay Van Hook, and he scored off the charts. So, it definitely doesn't measure actual book smarts, if that's the case, but it did give a really accurate depiction of what Clay was as a hitter, and it holds true for him, 15, 20 years after he actually played. So it's a great tool. It's, being part of 5-Tool, one of the things that we're really looking forward to is the development side of it, because we were able to touch age groups starting pretty, before high school now. And hopefully we can get this in the hands of those guys and get them tested. And hopefully it serves as a big development tool for them moving forward.
Yeah, well said. I think that any player who has aspirations of playing collegiately or professionally, they're doing a disservice to themselves if they don't take this test. Because it can just be such invaluable information that you really can't get anywhere else. And it's 45, or in the case of the younger players, it's 30 minutes. Yeah. It's 30 minutes to get something that can change, your complete way you kind of think about your development process and things like that. So we're super excited about it. We're going to have more podcasts with S2 guys. We've heard stories about some of the pros that take it in certain areas, and I'm a big, statistical guy with Major League Baseball. And you look at some of the players and some of the correlation that they're seeing with these test results in certain parts of their game, like do they chase a bunch, or how they handle certain pitches and things like that. And it's like, it blows me away at how much of a direct correlation there is. So thanks again so much to Dr. Scott Wiley for joining us. Again, you can go to S2Cognition.com. They do a really great job of outlining the type of information that you receive with the bar graph and the S2 overall score and the kind of the genesis behind the whole product and things like that. It's super interesting. It's fascinating. I think it's got a chance to be one of the true game changers in the baseball industry.
No doubt.
Yeah. So, well, that'll wrap it up for us today. Thank you for tuning in and listening. Again, you can find this on Apple Podcasts, Podbean. I'm sure at some point this will be up on YouTube, but thanks again to Dr. Scott Wiley for joining us. Until we talk to y'all next time, have a good weekend. Take care.